Well, it's good to be here with you, Louie. I'm here with Louie. I knew I'd do this. Psihoyos. Psihoyos, am I
That's it.
correct?
That's very good.
You probably get so many pronunciations of your name. Anyway, I'm here with Louie, and I'd like to just give you a brief intro. So Louie is an Academy Award-winning filmmaker and executive director of the Oceanic Preservation Society. You are recognized as one of the top still photographers in the world, having created for National Geographic and for Fortune magazine. And I did listen to a bit of your story and love the fact that you met a man called Jim Clark in 2005, which, from what I can understand, was a major shift in your orientation in your life for what you were doing, and you started to get into filmmaking. So that's a good beginning. And one of the first questions, well, maybe you'd like to tell us in a kind of potted history, if you could, about what you've been doing and a bit of your life. That would be a good start, I think.
Yeah.
Impossible to do, but there you go.
Yeah, I mean, career-wise, a photographer for National Geographic magazine. I was, primarily interested in trying to use the art form to try to, not just take beautiful pictures, but to try to move culture a little bit. I know that sounds kind of highfalutin, but I was doing stories like on when other people would want to do stories like go around the world and photograph like the famous places. I'd want to be. My first story for the magazine was on trash and recycling. That story I produced. And so I'm going around the world, traveling around, having everybody's dream, working for National Geographic, but I'm photographing garbage. And the reason was because back in I think it was 1980. One or so that I proposed that story to the magazine. There's only one mandatory recycling program in all of America. And I thought, using that platform of National Geographic to alert, maybe about 15% of the population of America that there's a problem. We're throwing away glass and aluminum and paper and not recycling. To me, that was unconscionable. When other parts of the world, they were already recycling. In fact, in the Philippines, they were guarding their garbage dumps with soldiers because they don't want the rag pickers to sell it for higher prices outside the dump.
Right.
And that set of pictures started a water cooler conversation around the country about like, why aren't we doing more with our garbage? And so I realized that you could use the platform of mass media to try to shift culture a little bit. And that's I drifted off from doing that for a while. I think I got known as the guy that could, well, if I can make garbage look good, you could do these other things. And I was really, it's only when I came into filmmaking really about 15 years ago, I was had a very good career as a still photographer. I did a shift into making films, and that's because, as you say, I met Jim Clark. And Jim Clark, for some people I might know, he was kind of the Steve Jobs of the generation before Steve Jobs. He's helped send man to the moon. He sped up the computers by 20-fold. He invented the 3D graphics engine, which is the first way that we could do gaming in real time, or CAD CAM, design things in real time. The day he stopped doing that, he started Netscape, the first commercial internet browser, the first way we could get on the internet. He was doing WebMD. It was a $3 billion company, but remember, these are like multi-billion-dollar companies started from scratch. There's no industry like it before it. So he's an innovator. And I wanted to photograph him for a story I was doing for the Information Revolution back in 1993. I think I started it for National Geographic. And he was too busy to be filmed. And then I started filming him when I was for a cover of Fortune magazine, and we became best friends. He was starting his fourth company. It was called Shutterfly, and he said to me, it was about how do you take digital images and turn them into analog prints. That was his company,
Right.
and he asked me to teach him how to be a good photographer. And I said, Jim, I'll teach you how to be a great photographer if you teach me how to be a billionaire.
Great.
Essentially, we started photographing around the world, mostly underwater. We're both divers, and we saw the collapse of our ecosystem going on in our generation. Every time we went back to a dive site, it's called shifting by baseline, where each successive generation adapts to the diminishment left behind by the previous one.
Yeah.
And we were coming up from a dive, and it's like our third time in the Galapagos, and you could see the changes going on: less fish, less coral, less everything.
Mm.
And there was fishermen illegally fishing in a marine sanctuary, and he said, somebody should do something about this. And I said something like, how about you and I? And
Great.
me, emboldened by his success, I said, well, he said, what do you mean? I said, well, we'll use your money and my eye, and we'll make films. And
Beautiful.
that's how we started. And
So
the
that
first,
relationship was quite fortuitous in being able to propel you into the film industry,
yeah,
which is
he became a great friend, and still is. And I love him dearly. He got me off on this business, and it's, I'm not a billionaire economically, but it's the most rewarding thing I've ever done, is to have the opportunity that he allowed me to do by starting this new career and doing what I'm doing now, which is going back to my roots and trying to basically put jumper cables on these issues that are so important to me, and I'd like to say humanity too. I think
yeah,
when you use a well-intentioned story like what we did with Mission Joy, and get where people, the light bulb goes off on them. It's called neuroplasticity, where you can actually not just entertain people, not just change the way they think, but change the way that they act, because you actually change their brain.
yeah,
That's the intention of the films that we do, is to try to nudge people a little bit towards, the center of what it means to be human.
yeah, beautiful. From what I've read and from what I've seen, say with The Cove, which was your first film back in 2005, I think, or that did line
That's 2000, and it came out in 2009, and then
nine. Okay,
yeah.
sorry, yeah. So that's what you've been doing, and it's beautiful to see that somebody has that sensibility to be able to allow change to come through the films. So, what was the impetus for getting involved with Mission Joy for you?
Well, I run a business called a nonprofit organization called the Oceanic Preservation Society. So we started doing ocean work, right? The Cove and racing extinction. Then when you start to realize, well, what's the core problem with this? It's not like you can go fix the oceans just by asking people to do it. There's something wrong at its heart of at the heart of it.
Yeah.
And right after we did those two films, which had a lot of ocean bases to it, we did a film called The Game Changers, which is about changing the food system.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really about plant-based super athletes. Men are really marketed too heavily around the world with the belief, this myth, that we need meat to be, have muscles and to have endurance and
Yeah.
have real. In the first, we basically focused in on world-class athletes that were, world's strongest guy, world's most accomplished ultra runner, et cetera,
Yeah.
illustrating that you don't need meat to be at the top of, your athletic prowessness. And the first 30 days that film was on Netflix, searches for plant-based diet went up 350% worldwide.
Oh,
So the
wow.
film was extremely successful. So, and and when you do, the thing is, like, the food is connected to just about everything we do. But I don't want to digress too much, but so if you want to fix what's going on in the oceans, you have to fix what's going on people's plates.
Yeah.
And if you
Yeah.
want to fix what's going on in people's plates, you have to fix what's going on in people's minds.
Yeah.
Therefore, Mission Joy is kind of the transitive property of association. We're getting more and more to the core root of how do we fix what's wrong with humanity?
Mhm.
And I think in those two men, those two great spiritual leaders, Desmond Tutu and His Holiness the Dalai Lama, they're two of the greatest spiritual leaders of all time. And to have our team, to have them in a room for 4.5 days talking about what it means to be human, was just a gift for everybody that worked on the film. It was just when I saw the footage and read the transcripts, it was just like, I think of it as like chiropractic for the soul. I just felt
Beautiful.
like
Yeah.
there's just some things just came in alignment. I wish I would have seen that film, not much less made it, when I was in my 20s. And I
Mm.
thought, oh, this is a perfect time for this film as we're coming out of this, this period of, crisis, existential crisis, where in the COVID, if for survivors of COVID, it's been, a chance for us to take a new assessment of what it means to be human. And I think
Yeah.
this film, with those spiritual leaders, they give guidance to that. Because
Yeah.
even though they come from quite different backgrounds, quite different religions, there's a core to humanity that's true no matter who you are, no matter what religion you are, even if you don't have a religion. There's a truth that they speak that's common to everybody on the planet.
Yeah.
And, people want to know what that is. And, I don't even know if people will be able to hear it if they haven't, unless you're close to understanding it. But, if you're not in service to other people,
Mm-hmm.
this common good, I
Yeah.
don't know if you're ever going to find real joy, lasting joy, because at least in the Western world, the pursuit of, you know, material things, the physical things is never going to get us where we want to get to. Because once you get it, it's like
Yeah.
just disappears, and because it's fleeting. And
Yeah.
joy is when you're in service to helping other people, and I think that's what gets us closer to being human.
Yeah, yeah. Well, your life's a testimony to that, from what I can discern in the little bit that I've led. You've actually provided service. You've almost come full cycle around in terms of what you've been doing and now what you're doing. And I think, not being 20, but providing what you're providing for 20-year-olds who are now 20 is actually letting them see the world through a different lens, and a lens that's probably more realistic than, say, what we did in our 20s. I'm probably close in age, similar. So I think what you're doing now is allowing that generation, those younger generations, to see something from a more sustainable and valuable perspective than possibly what we had. But we've got there in our own kind of way. Just looking at these two men, I was going to ask for your insight into their characters. You've kind of given a broad brushstroke of that already, but, the Dalai Lama, what did you discern in his character and Desmond Tutu's character? I know we get some of that from the film, but I was interested in your perspective, your personal perspective.
Well, they're quite playful.
Yeah,
They're like children in a way,
yeah,
but the playfulness is they still maintain that well into their 80s, and that's beautiful to see.
yeah,
But they're also really present, to give advice, to be there at the deepest level, and to access what they've gone through, and being able to give that back to almost anybody that comes to them
yeah,
is I think their way of being in service. Like the Dalai Lama says something, you know Archbishop asks him, like, why aren't you morose, after you've been in exile from your own country for, I don't know what it was, 60 years at that point. And
yeah,
he said, there's a wonderful thing they do in Buddhism where they reframe. They don't look at only the darkness of what they went through, like having to be thrown out of your country in exile. He looks at what are the
yeah,
advantages of it. And he said, and now imagine that, we said it would have been like golden handcuffs if I was still back in that 1,000-room palace, and it's cloistered to the rest of the world. This gives him an opportunity. This new opportunity
mm-hmm.
opened up, and I think there's something wonderful about that. When how can you change what's seen as darkness? And you could do with it doesn't have to be exile. It could be
Huh.
divorce, or losing a job, or going broke, or losing a loved one, or whatever it is, and try to reframe that. Say, what are the lessons I can learn from this, and how can I make it better?
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
that's you know you can look at that as a microcosm too of just about anything that you do. I mean, it's
Yeah,
not little stuff to the big stuff. How can I how can you take this and learn from it? And that
yeah,
way, you're failing upward is what you're doing. You're just learning how to succeed by, taking, not saying it's not a failure. It didn't, it's just like, how can I change this? How can I change my outlook on this and reframe it? So it's a learning opportunity instead of like, oh, I'm not that good. I'm a failure. So
Yeah.
that's I mean, there's so many lessons that they both learned, and I think that wisdom, that shared wisdom, is really important. That you realize that there's, when you see both men talking, they're really helping talk about the same kinds of things. Even they have, life different perspectives in a way, but they have this. They're trying to get at the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Archbishop Tutu was a little bit more, I would say, compassionate. He was, his heart was on his sleeve more, and
Yeah.
the Dalai Lama is a little bit more cerebral, and
Yeah.
sometimes people, there's a wonderful scene in the film where these little, these children are sharing how they escaped uh, Tibet and got into India to study under the Dalai Lama school, and one of
Yeah.
the girls breaks down and cries, and right away, Desmond Tutu and his daughter try to, their first instinct is to comfort her, and the Dalai Lama, it could be looked at as a little bit cold. His advice was like right away to talk about, hey, how you could use this opportunity, and to to
Right.
to,
Yeah.
to learn to study this 1,000-year-old tradition of blah blah blah, which was true. But at that moment, I think the girl just wanted to be, sometimes you just want to share, you don't want
Yeah.
to learn at the moment, you just want to feel
No.
the, but both are
Yeah.
right. But yeah, anyway, I mean,
Yeah. Beautiful.
it's
So I was gonna, you really answered. I had, in 20 minutes, I had three questions. And the third one was, what have you learnt about these remarkable men that's changed you and your interaction in your world?
oh my
And
God.
you,
I mean, I think I was strung a little bit tight, and then I realized that, right now I can wait a half a beat or several beats now before I answer. You know, I,
beautiful.
I'm much more ready to listen and see somebody, see
Mm,
who they are, seeing what they're, look at their point of view,
yeah.
no matter what. And it's interesting. It's it's opened up a new creative line too. Like when you're able to share and to really understand somebody, you can get a little bit. Everything I do is a collaborative process. I mean, making a film, there's, you know, dozens, hundreds of people that some of them you never even see, but they're all really have to be. You're trying to work with the best of everybody of what they can
Mhm.
offer. So it's a collaborative process. So it's been really valuable for me. I mean, I would think of anybody that's, you don't have to be a leader to take the advice that they give you. You could be anybody doing anything with any relationship, how you deal with your spouse, your job, your children, yourself. Just
Mhm.
leave
Mhm.
a beat to process and not be so judgmental about yourself or other people, or just be able to, be more present. And
Yeah.
it's not more work. It's more rewarding, I think, is what it is.
Definitely. Well, you used a phrase which I thought was beautiful. It was a realignment of the soul, and that was part of what you gained from the film, which is beautiful. And also to shift values. I think in our culture, values can get so distorted about what is of value, but you actually, in what you've said so far, is offered a realignment of values too in our culture, and just really appreciate the work that you're doing in terms of what you're providing. And the last thought I had was, can you tell us a short story of some of your major life endeavors and how you now see that mission joy or having had contact with these two men has played into that for you. And it may be about the film that you're making now, but I know there's also 5 other projects you've got on the go from what I learned from what I was in my bit of research.
Yeah, we have 5 other films. They're all on, social topics. We're doing one on plastic pollution solutions, one called The Last Place on Earth, which is the last place where wild tigers, orangutans, elephants, and rhinos are in the wild together. And we're focusing on the 4 activists that are working in Sumatra to get back the illegal palm plantations and turning them back over to wild forest. Doing a film on 4 female big wave surfers that got pay parity in the sport of this male dominated sport. We're doing a film on the Fermi paradox, and it's called The Great Filter. We've got a lot of projects. I have a couple still projects, a couple books that we're working on. So Jim Clark built us this amazing camera. That's the best underwater still camera that's ever been made. I go off to Indonesia next week to spend 2.5 weeks photographing with it to get baseline readings of some of the best preserved reefs in the world. Got a lot of great projects, but all of them, I don't do any projects unless it's gonna, I feel really good about it. We're not doing just for the money. And so then, people say, boy, you work so hard. It's like, no, it's such an incredible opportunity. I wake up every day like excited because there's this wide open road of opportunity everywhere I go, and I just want to take advantage of it all. And it feeds me. It's energetic to do this kind of work. But one thing I'm really excited about doing are these projection events. We've done projection events for what we do is like, when we did Racing Extinction, one of the last scenes in the movie, we did projections of an endangered species on the United Nations, and then we did it on the Empire State Building. These are at that point, this had never been done before, and
what's
we had
projection?
It's basically we basically use these some of the world's most iconic buildings as basically like a movie screen.
Yeah.
So when you project images of anything on the United Nations, it's the one building that represents humanity coming together to solve these big existential problems. Whatever you think about the United Nations, it's the one organization that we have to do it. So when you project endangered species on the 38-story tall building, of a nudibranch, which is a long, colorful, beautiful, psychedelic sea slug, and it basically creates the impression that these animals deserve, to be preserved too. It's up to us. We're not just looking after humanity at the UN. We're looking after all of life. And then we did it later on for on the Empire State Building, and we had, I think, just short of 1 billion media views in 5 days. It was top trending story on Facebook and Twitter worldwide. We thought we couldn't get any more attention than that on endangered species than the Pope called. The Pope wanted us to project on the Vatican during COP 20. Remember, Pope Francis is named after Saint Francis of Assisi, the patron saint of animals.
Yes.
So he wanted us to project, animals on the Vatican. And I never met the Pope when we did this, but we talked to his number 2. We went over there before then. He says, well, if it was up to me, this wouldn't happen. But the Pope wants it to happen. I said, well, why would you want this to happen? He says, well, the last person to do anything on the front of the Vatican was Michelangelo.
Oh, great. That's lovely.
There's 600 media there, about, I think, 225,000 people watching it live. And we had 4.4 billion media views. And it wasn't just about the attention we got to it. It really, again, started one of these water cooler conversations around the world. And at least in America, it helped create laws that protect some of the most endangered species. And, I'm real proud of that. That's not just a projection event to get attention. It does something. When you see these images of animals on these buildings. It's basically, it's, you know, it's stunning to see it. It's a spectacle. And now
Yeah.
we're doing another one on the Empire State Building in September for the opening of Climate Week. In fact, I haven't announced
Oh,
it to
beautiful.
anyone. This is
Yeah.
the first that we've actually talked about it. But now we figured out a way without so we can have Jane Goodall speaking 60 stories tall, you know, on the Empire State Building to people in the streets below listening on their cell phones. And so
Beautiful.
we're doing that 3 days, September 14th, 15th, and 16th. And that's real
Excellent.
exciting because then we
Yeah.
have it's a chance to talk at the world at scale.
Yeah, right. I have to put in a word for the Opera House at some point.
Yeah, well,
And it could be about First Nations people or something. I don't know. It's just, that's what comes off the top of my head at the moment.
oh, that's great. We
It's
did
a
one
very
that
iconic building down here. Yeah.
we did one on First Nations over at the COP in Glasgow 2 years ago.
Right. Beautiful.
Mhm.
Well, I can see that our time's rapidly coming to closure. And is there any last things you'd like to say to people who are going to be watching? This is part of the South African Film Festival, so they're going to be watching Mission Joy mostly. And I don't know if I told you, but the proceeds for this, it's non-for-profit, they go to Education Without Borders, which is for Black South African children. So it's, you're doing
Lovely.
another good thing in that sense.
Oh, everybody, listen, you're all doing a great thing. So it's just it's a wonderful opportunity to be able to talk with you and your
Thank
people
you.
there.
Yeah.
And hope you all enjoy the film. And and you know, Desmond Tutu's gone, but you know, we're waiting to see who else is going to. Everybody can step up and try to fill his shoes because you're going to need a whole nation of people to do that. What a lovely man.
Yeah, beautiful. Well, thank you. I so appreciate your time, Louie, and appreciate what you're doing too in the world. You're really offering something that's reaching a lot of people and having major changes in what's going on this beautiful planet of ours. So thank you so much, and thanks for being with us.
Yeah, I appreciate it. It's a whole team behind me or with me that have been doing this work. But thank you for the accolades. Cheers.
Yeah,
But
thanks so much.